Okay, today we're doing Sim Kuf Gimel Halacha Aino Ben Yomo. We're here in Hilchos Taruvas. The Shulchan Aruch brings that if a kli is Aino Ben Yomo, then its Blios that it gives off doesn't affect the food b'diavad. It's 24 hours I haven't used the kli, then I'm okay and I don't have to worry about Blios, which of course is very, very relevant. Every time people make mistakes in the kitchen, it's one of the most common reasons why things are going to be mutter b'diavad is because it hasn't been used in 24 hours. I stuck my milchig spoon in my fleishik abat, or I stuck something in the microwave the wrong way, and I haven't used the other one for your official use in 24 hours. That's going to save me. Okay, so that's that's the part that it says here in Hilchos Taruvas. And a lot of the dinim that are here in Sim Kuf Gimel about Aino Ben Yomo are also in Sim Kuf Chaf Beis. And in Sim Kuf Chaf Beis, it adds in something important that's sort of a little understood over here, but it's not spoken out until Sim Kuf Chaf Beis, and that is that this whole din is only din b'diavad. But you can't use the kli lechatchila and say, oh, since it's Aino Ben Yomo, I'm allowed to use it. In Midaraisa, you're allowed to do that. Midaraisa, there's no blia. The blia is not usher anymore. You're allowed to use it, or it doesn't affect the food anymore. But there's a xer Aino Ben Yomo ata Ben Yomo. We saw once beforehand. We spoke about is xer Aino Ben Yomo ata Ben Yomo a chashash that I'll use this kli when it's Ben Yomo, meaning I'll count wrong. I think that it becomes Aino Ben Yomo at 10 o'clock and really becomes Aino Ben Yomo at 11 o'clock and I'll use it wrong. Or if I use this kli that's when it's Aino Ben Yomo, tomorrow I'm going to use a different kli when it's Ben Yomo. What the exact chashash is. Okay. But the point is, there is a xer Aino Ben Yomo ata Ben Yomo. It doesn't say that here in Sim Kuf Gimel, but it says it over there. So it means you're only allowed to do it b'diavad. Okay. What's the difference between whether I do it lechatchila and b'diavad? So we would just think it's just lechatchila and b'diavad, just like don't do it. But if he did it, then it's mutter. Taisus gives a little explanation to it, and he says xer Aino Ben Yomo ata Ben Yomo applies any case where the iser was once l'shvach. Once it was Ben Yomo, and now it became Aino Ben Yomo. So Chazal said, don't use it when it's Aino Ben Yomo because you might use it when it's Ben Yomo, or you might use it in a different kli when it's Ben Yomo. But if it was never l'shvach in this kli, then in this item, then there's no iser. So if I have a pot that I cooked in now fleishigs, I can't use it milchig because right now it's l'shvach. Even after 24 hours, I still won't be able to use it. But when the blia comes from that kli that's Aino Ben Yomo, it comes into my food. By the time the food that it came into, it always came in l'fgam. It never was l'shvach when it came into the food, and therefore Chazal didn't ask that case. They only asked the case when it was once l'shvach. Then they said, don't use it when it's l'fgam because of the chashash you might use it when it's l'shvach. But if it was never l'shvach in this food, meaning because it was by the time I got into the case of b'diavad, it's not just that it's b'diavad. The case of b'diavad also means is that it was never l'shvach in this food, and since it was never l'shvach in this food, so Chazal chose to not aser in that kind of case.
So technically, really, if I make meat in a pot, and then I want to make applesauce, and we would say meat is l'fgam in applesauce, right? Straight meat, and then meat is l'fgam in applesauce. It'd be mutar l'chatchila to use it.
Because, no, so that's not the same. Because meat is l'fgam into applesauce, but it's not l'fgam into something else. So the time that's in here is l'shvach for something. So Chazal said, don't use it for anything, even when it's l'fgam, because you might use it the wrong way. But if it's in a food that it was never l'shvach, I mean, if I actually cooked the applesauce,
meat is never l'shvach in applesauce. Let's say.
I know, but what happens if I make something else? If I make another piece of meat in here, and as I cook something else in here, then it won't be l'shvach. So they're not saying that this is not always l'fgam. It's l'fgam for that situation.
So why by stam yenim in our cases where it's mutter even because you say it's l'fgam, this gives l'fgam and that?
Because there's l'fgam into everything. Except of wine. There's not l'fgam into wine. It's a good question. I'm not sure because it's not l'fgam into wine. It's l'fgam into every other liquid except for wine. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, so maybe
second mutter. It's just that we don't know, so we never say that's this is l'fgam into something that
to do it. That you should do
those things. You don't make it those asharas.
You say
if Chazal tells, then we would do it.
I'm not sure. Maybe you're right. I don't think that's correct, but maybe you're right. I don't. Okay, in cheshboning, whether something is Aino Ben Yomo, the normal typical way you do it is we hold it has 24 hours. Okay, there's a sheet that's showing him that Aino Ben Yomo means it was linas laila. So if it wasn't used overnight, it means it was not from Aino Ben Yomo. It's not from this day. It's from yesterday. So it's linas laila. We hold that it has to be 24 hours. And the typical way you do that is you wait 24 hours until it happened. Okay, so what happens? the question, the issue that there are is what happens if there was something else in the pot that was, let's say, it had been treif 24 hours ago, but it was in the middle. There was something that was kosher, or that was par, or something that not relevant to the not problematic, but it was in the in between. Okay, so for example, on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock we had treif in the pot. Okay, and then afterwards at 10 o'clock. We for half an hour we were cooking spaghetti in there, something kosher and par, had no shaykhs, didn't bother anything like that. So the Machaber and the Ramos speak about this in right over here in Halacha Zayin, from the perspective of Hanan. The Machaber says, I don't hold of Hanan, so as far as I'm concerned, the par means nothing. Some blia may have come out, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't mean difference to me. So unless it had been basa b'chalav, I wouldn't be worried about it. He says, let's say it would be basa b'chalav, then I would be worried. Let's say I had cooked meat in the pot at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock I cooked milk in the pot. The milk that gets cooked into there is basa b'chalav, so then it asses the kli from scratch. So now at 10 o'clock it became treif again. That would be a problem. But if it was just treif and then I cook spaghetti in it, and not anything, nothing fleishigs or treif like that, then he says there's no problem, and your 24 hours keeps on going. The Ramah says, I hold of Hanan, even b'shar Yisurim. It says I hold of Hanan, even b'shar Yisurim, so that means is that at 10 o'clock when I cooked the spaghetti became treif, and the spaghetti became treif. Now it has a new blia starting at 10 o'clock, a new treif blia. It wasn't just a blia at 9 o'clock, there's a blia at 10 o'clock, and therefore the 24 hours starts again from 10 o'clock. Okay, you have to count the 24 hours starting from 10 o'clock. So,
according to Mechaber, why still don't we say that? Okay, the time came out, didn't answer it, but the time came out and went back in, so it was rejuvenated.
Okay, so I'm getting to that in a second. Maybe we should say something like that, but the Mechaber doesn't talk like that. He says no, it's just a matter of Hanan. The time is. It's old. The time has been around since 9 o'clock yesterday. So since it's 9 o'clock, so it's 24 hours, and it's okay. He only cares about the Hanan. The Mechaber only cares about the Hanan. And the Ramah says, I also only care about the Hanan, but I am machmir by Hanan. So the Ramah says, but you should just know, we're making about Hanan blach b'makom hefsid. Okay, so that this is if this is just a chumrah of Hanan, so there's kulas about Hanan. For example, there's sometimes the Ramah says sometimes we could be mitzaref linas laila. Not every case. We talked about this once. How you do that? Sometimes you mitzaref linas laila together with being not machmir for Hanan to be makel also. I mean, if it had been linas laila plus the only chashash is Hanan, so those are two chumras. Because some Rishonim hold linas laila is enough to make it Aino Ben Yomo. So let's say it already had a whole night, but it didn't have the 24 hours because of this hour when you cook the spaghetti in it. So to be choishes for Hanan, and not to for those Rishonim, there are cases when you could be making Ramah says also. Plus, we also know that there are some cases when there's no Hanan, like chametz before Pesach, or kosher milk or kosher meat. Those are heter. Those also don't have Hanan. So in case where there's no Hanan, the Ramah would be makel. So the Ramah says, I'm just being machmir for cases of Hanan. That gives us a lot of space. There are cases where there's no Hanan, the cases where mitzar Hanan with other things, and then some we say Hanan b'shar Yisurim, b'makom hefsed, we could be makel about Hanan also. Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility, so to speak, in that kind of case. Now, that brings to another thing, which is Ziyah Yehuda, who says it's true that there's no. He says, okay, Hanan, I'm okay with the Hanan part of it. He says, but let's say we don't have to worry about Hanan. Let's say forget about Hanan. He says, but you should know that during the time that the spaghetti is cooking in the pot, the pigima pauses. Doesn't stop. Not like you said, it doesn't start again. It pauses. So if we cook spaghetti, in my case, I told you at 9 o'clock we cook treif, and at 10 o'clock we cook spaghetti for half an hour. We lost a half an hour of the pigima of Aino Ben Yomo. It can't become pogum while this cooking is going on. We don't restart it, but that means is tomorrow we don't become 24 hours at 9 o'clock. We become at 9:30 because we lost the half an hour. There's a half an hour pause in the middle over here. There's a half an hour pause over here, and therefore we lose that half an hour. Okay. Now Yehud says he tells you that the Shach and the Crazy Placey and others don't agree with him. Okay, and most people are not machmir for this. Yehud. Okay, this Yehud, he says, I'm telling you a chiddush. To say that you pause, you lose the time while you were cooking the part in between. He's machmir for this. Well, could be. Okay, most people are not machmir. I think it's an official. Actually, I think Rabbi once told us we shouldn't be machmir. But yeah, most people should not be machmir. No, most people are not machmir for this thing. Okay, now then there's another shita, even more chomer than Yehuda. Okay, and that is the Maimon Mordechai, who says, he says that the Yad Yehuda is talking about when there's cooking going on, there's heat, and the bli is not, sitting there the way it was supposed to. The Mordechai says that even if you have cold stuff in the container, okay, a full container can't become lifkam. So while it's full, it's not clear if it pauses or stops or completely stops it. But if there's stuff in there, then that pauses that
liquid, right?
A liquid, yeah, liquid.
Coverage, like at least.
Yeah, but not covered. It's not 24 hours.
Not 24 hours.
Right, but a liquid in there. No, the pigima doesn't happen when there's a liquid in there. Okay, now the Mishabura mentions the shita. Right? He mentions it. Doesn't seem like he holds like it. He brings such shita, and that's even more, to me, even more common than Yad Yehuda. Yad Yehuda is saying is to do it when it's liquid and it pauses it. So again, just like Teddy with Yad Yehuda, I think most people are make about this. Okay.
Which shita was this again?
This is Maimon Mordechai. Maimon Mordechai. It's in. If you want to know where it is, in Taf Mem Zayin Sefkot Yud Zayin. In Hilchos Pesach, yeah. Okay. Now let's move to something else. I told you that B'diavad Aino Ben Yomo is mutter. There are some cases where it's not mutter B'diavad. Okay. The first one is one you probably could guess, and that is the Ramah, according to Ashkenazim, say that chametz on Pesach is Nosh Tam Lefgam is Aser, and since Nosh Tam Lefgam is Aser, so Aino Ben Yomo is also Aser. Okay, but of course that only happens if the blia happened on Pesach. So if on Pesach you took out a chametzik pot by mistake and you cooked in it, or you used a chametzik spoon by mistake and you cooked and used it, Aino Ben Yomo is not going to help you. If you did it before Pesach, it'll be mutter. Anything happens before Pesach, it's not a problem. But on Pesach, Nosh Tam Lefgam is Aser, and Memela Aino Ben Yomo is also Aser. The Ramah says that's again in Hilchos Pesach. Okay. Okay. The as a rule, I told you that Aino Ben Yomo is mutter. Okay, there's an exception to that rule, and that is if the blia that was in the barrel, in the kli, was wine, then wine is said to improve with age, and since it improves with age, it doesn't become pogum when it sits in the kli. It becomes better when it sits in the kli, and therefore blias out of wine that are Aino Ben Yomo, Aino Ben Yomo doesn't help. That doesn't do anything for your wine. So it doesn't make a difference when you. Now there are other kulas about blias of wine, but not this kula does not work. Now there's a Magen Avram who implies that whiskey should have the same din. That because whiskey also improves with age. Now, just to an aside, whiskey and wine don't improve with age the same way. Whiskey improves with age when it sits in a barrel. My impression is that wine improves with age. Which is in general, as long as there's no air in the container, it improves with age, as opposed to whiskey it's when it's in a barrel. But that's just an aside point. So that's that's what Magen Avram says. Pri Megadim is not so happy about that shita, and when the Mishabur talks about whiskey, the Kashrus things that held whiskey in them, his implication, he talks about a little bit about this type of Magen Avram, that these things are more strict for whiskey, but he talks about that because whiskey leaves a smell in the kli. So if I don't get the smell out, I can't kasher the kli. But it doesn't sound like he accepts this idea that whiskey is, has a special chumrah that even when it's it doesn't become Nosh Tam Lefgam. Okay, the impression is not like that. That is special just for wine. Okay. Another thing about Aino Ben Yomo, sort of about B'diavad, is this that we say that Aino Ben Yomo is mutter B'diavad is only for regular foods. But if the kosher food that we cook afterwards was a davar charif, then it'll be mechayil l'shvach. Even though the blia that was in there, the blia is Aino Ben Yomo. So usually blia that's Aino Ben Yomo, it's no matter what the food's going to be mutter. But if the kosher food that I cooked in it is a davar charif, then it will turn the Aino Ben Yomo, so to speak, into a Ben Yomo. We talked about this when we learned that then. So that's just an extra twist to it, that even though Aino Ben Yomo is a big kula, it doesn't always work. Okay, and the last of this section is, the Pri Megadim says like this, that if a person purposely chooses to use a kli that's Aino Ben Yomo, knowing that it's treif, but he says, it's okay, it's Aino Ben Yomo, and the food's going to be mutter b'diavad, so I'm good, I'm okay. So he says, the food would be aser, it would be like bitul l'chatchila. Okay, now, it's not regular bitul l'chatchila. Bitul l'chatchila means is I take iser and I put it into my food. Here, what I'm putting into my food is going to be heter, I know it's going to be mutter. But the concept is the same. That's the point he's making. That the concept is the same. I'm taking something I'm not supposed to do. I'm doing it knowing that if I do it, at the end of the day, I'm going to be allowed to have it. So Chazal don't want people to do things like that. And therefore, they say that the food that you did that with is aser. And he tells you, he says, and he tells you should know. Go look at a shach in Hilchos Trefes, okay? And the shach in Hilchos Trefes says the same basic idea. The shach, again, it's not a case where you mevatel isser. The shach says what happens if you lose the lungs of an animal before you get to check them, then in lots of cases the animal is going to be kosher. Even though you don't know if the animal is a treifa, if you can't check it anymore, the animal is going to be kosher. Now that it happened, the animal is going to be kosher. So Shach says, but if you throw the lungs out and you get rid of them and say, I'm not looking, and throw them in the garbage before anyone gets to check them, then the animal is treif because it's like bitlis l'chatchila. Again, it's the case. You're not being mevatel isser, you're not taking an isser and putting it into your food, but conceptually it's the same idea, which is you're taking something that you're not supposed to do, and you're saying, I know that in the evidence, if X happens, I'm going to be allowed to have it. Halacha says, don't do X on purpose to be able to have the food that we didn't want you to have. So again, it's not being mevatel isser, but it's the same concept idea, which is I'm doing something to get around what Chazal wanted me to do, knowing that if I do it, it's going to be the evidence. No. In that case, but the evidence is not going to be mutter. Okay, so that's the same concept. That's why the Pri Megadim tells you look at that shach, because it's the same idea, and the same over here also. If you use a kli that's Aino Ben Yomo, it's also not technically it's not bitlis l'chatchila, but it has the same status, and the food will be also b'diavad. Okay.
Moshe was very like this.
That what?
You're 100% amazed went ahead and did Aino Ben Yomo kli. It's still more to be.
No, Ramesh says when you make food in a kli that's Aino Ben Yomo, the food is mutter l'chatchila. This is talking about a person who purposely did it. I did it myself, not that it happened. Remember, says that food is mutter l'chatchila. I'm talking about it when I go ahead and I choose to. I say I know my kli is treif, and I'm going to do it anyhow because I want to get around. I know that if I do it, it'll be mutter. That's what he says is not law. That's what he says. The food will be awesome.
So what is it? What you say is mutter?
If it happened. When someone happened, the food is not. The food is not mutter b'diavad. The food that I made in it is mutter l'chatchila. So that might be true. That's not the same as over here. We're saying is not. It's not a matter. It's a class on you. You who went ahead and did it. For you, the food is also. You did it because you were mevatel l'chatchila. For you, the food is also.
So you're saying the guy who did it for himself, somebody else is mutter.
Yeah, like every bitul is l'chatchila. Everyone mevatel l'chatchila. It's also for me, but it's mutter for you.
I don't think he says that. I think he says that even if you over b'mezid the halacha, it's still mutter.
Really? Okay. So we'll have to look at it. I don't remember it that way. It might be right. Okay. Okay, and our last bunch of things is I just told you that cases when it doesn't work with the evid.
Right, so it could be something others argue. I mean, I always wondered about Allah. How could it? Because it sounds strange. But how could it be? But I think that's.
Well, I mean, again, the reason to argue is it's not technically it's l'chatchila. Right? I'm not being about that. So it's not technically.
You went ahead and you said you went ahead and did it.
Correct. Okay, that's okay. So now the opposite of what I said to you beforehand of that it doesn't even work with the evid is that there are two situations when you potentially could do it even l'chatchila. Okay, you can even do it l'chatchila. Okay, and the first is we do it every time when we kasher a kli. When we kasher a kli Aino Ben Yomo, and we say I'm going to kasher the kli. The tom is going to come out. It's going to go into the water, even though I know that tom is going to turn around and go right back into the kli. So I'm taking a kli that's tom that's lefgam. I'm putting it right back into my kli, and I know that's going to happen. So I'm doing it l'chatchila. I'm choosing to get it into my kli. This Aino Ben Yomo time, and it's going to be fine. That's going to be mutter. I'm allowed to use it. So you're allowed to do it in that case. The Rashba explains like this. He asks us a question. He says I don't understand. If the tom is Aino Ben Yomo, I'm going to take the tom into the water, and the tom's going to go right back into the kli. He says, so why are we wasting our time? What's the point of this? Getting the tom out of the kli for it to go right back in. In the end of the day, we end up with the same thing. The tom is back in the kli where it started from. So we're wasting our time to take the tom out of the kli and put it right back inside of it. Seems like a waste of time. So the Rashba says is that along the lines of what I told you at the beginning from Taisus, that is that when Chazal asked Aino Ben Yomo Ata Ben Yomo, they asked it in the kli where the isser started off l'shvach. But in the water, the water that I kasher with, that water, it was always lefgam. So since it was always lefgam into that water, so that water is 100% mutter. And now you want that bli goes back in, doesn't bother anybody. So even though it's going back into kli that yesterday it was l'shvach, but from the perspective of the kli, it's as if it's a new bli coming into it, and that new bli is so to speak kosher, even l'chatchila. Now it happens to be, the Ramah says, you shouldn't use the hag'alah water. You should treat the hag'alah water as if it has bli of isser in it. In other words, we shouldn't look at the water as if it's totally kosher, but That's just a minig and a chumrah. Like in special cases when there's a reason not to, you're allowed to be making on that. But etzem, the Raj was saying is that water is 100% mutter. It doesn't have the tam was never shvach in it, so it's mutter. Okay, and the last thing, the idea of maybe using it lechatchila is as follows. I'm going to say this briefly. We spoke about this also once when we spoke about hag'alah kalim, and that is if the din is that if you use a barrel for wine and then the barrel is empty for 12 months, then the wine dries up and the barrel becomes mutter. You don't even have to kasher it. You can use the barrel as is. It becomes so dried out that it's like eitz b'alma, and you could use the barrel as is. And the question is, why did that din only say by wine? How come it doesn't say that din someplace else? It's in Hilchas Yayin. Why isn't it in every place else? Why isn't that just every place? If you use something for treif, then you use it for 12 months, then it's dried out and it's mutter. Okay, that's a question. Tzvi says that the answer to that question is something that you would not have guessed. Okay, it's counterintuitive what you would have guessed. He says for most isurim, once it's Aino Ben Yomo, it's mutter, and as soon as Aino Ben Yomo, it becomes mutter. So, but Chazal said that we're not going to allow you to be makel about Aino Ben Yomo. Okay, they said Aino Ben Yomo, Otter Ben Yomo. They said even when it crosses that line and it becomes mutter, we're going to ask her anyhow you're not allowed to use it. So 24 hours or 12 months is the same thing. Once Chazal answered it, they said, even though the blia that's in there is really mutter, too bad, and it's usher, and too bad on you. So when it comes 12 months, it doesn't make a difference. 24 hours or 12 months is all the same thing. He says, but when we come to a food, a blia like wine that I told you a few minutes ago, blias of wine do not become lefkam. After 24 hours, they do not become mutter. So there's no gzer Aino Ben Yomo Otter Ben Yomo. Chazal never asked. It never was relevant to say that when it's Aino Ben Yomo, it's still usher anyhow, because Aino Ben Yomo doesn't play a role in wine. He says so. There was no gzer Aino Ben Yomo Otter Ben Yomo on wine. So what happens? So now eventually there's another level when it gets not just lefkam, it becomes totally dried out and nothing. When we cross that line, hey, okay, if we cross the line, then it becomes mutter. So at 12 months, it becomes mutter. So it turns out that the chumrah, that wine doesn't become Aino Ben Yomo, turns into a kula that when it comes 12 months, we can be makel and say, oh, now cross a new line. Oh, cross that line, it becomes mutter. And there's no gzera, so to speak, Aino Ben Shana, Atu Ben Shana, no such gzera. And therefore, you're allowed to eat it. Okay, so that's how he explains why the din is specifically said by wine and not by any place else. He says imkain. Chacham Tzvi says, so he's not finished yet. He says imkain. That's just like a academic understanding of what's going on. He says, he said I want to say the same kula for chametz and Pesach. He says Ashkenazim say that Aino Ben Yomo is usher. If blia happens on Pesach, it's usher. He says so to speak, no gzeir Aino Ben Yomo Otter Ben Yomo for chametz on Pesach, because blias even that are Aino Ben Yomo are usher. Im kain, if it's 12 months old, then we can be makel. Because I just told you that anytime there's no gzeir Aino Ben Yomo Otter Ben Yomo, then the kula of 12 months applies. So over here, where there's sort of no gzeir Aino Ben Yomo Otter Ben Yomo, because we have this chumrah that we aser chametz on Pesach even if it's Aino Ben Yomo, therefore I could be makel to say that if it's 12 months old, then it's going to be mutter. Now, Chacham says this is a big chiddush. Doesn't say this in any place. Doesn't say it in Hilchas Pesach. It's a big chiddush to say is Aino Ben Yomo really is more chamor. I mean, Aino Ben Yomo the day before Pesach it makes a difference. Just Aino Ben Yomo on Pesach doesn't make a difference. It's a big chiddush what he's saying. So he says you should know. I only want to tell you my chiddush b'diavad. I don't want. He didn't say you should be making lechatchila. He said I just want to be samech on this b'diavad. If by mistake the person used a chametz pot that it was more than 12 months old and it was on Pesach, that then you could be making. It would say b'diavad. You could be making. He doesn't want to be making lechatchila. And if you think about the logic, it's specific to chametz and chametz on Pesach. It's specific to that case. But in the intervening years, other people have said to do it even l'chatchila. They said just like wine. Hey, 12 months, you can do it even l'chatchila. People said even for other isurim. And the whole.
Where's it? There's a sheet that says even 12 months for all isurim.
It comes from the Chacham Tzvi. The Chacham Tzvi is his logic is specific to chametz for Pesach. The din only says it by wine. He says okay, it also means chametz on Pesach also. But for sure, it can't be more. The whole logic is to say it's only by chametz on Pesach. And other people say, yes, sir, it doesn't make a difference. 12 months old. From the Chacham Tzvi.
Feinstein doesn't use this.
Yes, as a tiruf. Yes, other people say it also as a tiruf. It's a good question. It's a good question. The whole idea of the chamtzi is to say this is just like that special din of wine because this special thing and the whole thing. Anyhow, but
maybe.
Anyhow, kacha. Okay.